Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last meeting in calendar 2024 of our American Mussar weekly gathering. This will be our second week exploring the soul trait of honor. So we'll get started the way we always do with a short meditation. I think my camera may be dirty, so I'm just going to clean it. We'll see what happens. Excuse, there's going to be a little interruption of my, okay, maybe a little cleaner. Um, so we'll begin the way we always do with a short meditation. So relax in your seat and close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And as thoughts come into your head, just observe them and let them go, like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. All you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, hello to Paul and Carrie and Marjorie. You were the surprise visitors when my eyes were closed. Nice to see you. So before we talk about honor in more depth, um, the question I want to get us started with today is the definition of Mussar from Rabbi Ira Stone, and I think it was from Rabbi Simcha Zissel Ziv before him, but its Mussar is learning to bear the burden of the other. So I'm going to copy this and I'll put it into the chat. Last week we were talking about practicing honor is seeing other people with a good eye. This is a little bit of a different idea. The whole practice is about bearing the burden of the other. So what does that mean to you? Or what questions does that bring up?
Bear the burden of the other. Huh.
So Martin,
Yeah, I would say learning to bear would not mean that you have to take on their burden.
mhm.
So don't make it your burden, but to bear, it's just maybe just be empathetic, I think. But yeah, to take it on, well, now you've inherited a hardship. And how good is that for yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's about empathy, it's empathizing with their burden, but without, maybe it doesn't mean that we literally take it on. It's more about empathy. Okay, great. Thank you. Beth, what are your thoughts?
There are different kinds of burdens. It could be a physical need, a need for an old lady to help across the street or load her groceries, or it could be an emotional burden. Somebody needs to talk out their problems. Do they just need someone to listen?
Mhm.
There are lots of different kinds of problems, and we need to be aware and tuned into which kind of burden they have.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. So I'm hearing is being tuned in to other people's burdens. Maybe it's just being a listening, being able to bear witness to kind of what they're experiencing. I've heard this also come up kind of in the context of relationship and patience, where if someone is doing something which is annoying us, we need to kind of hang in there with them, um, and maintain that relationship, bear the burden of maintaining the relationship. Of course, we don't want to take it too far, as with all things in Musar, but there's a lot of relationships which can fall within the healthy, the definition of a healthy relationship, but we still kind of need to put up with some stuff from the other person, or at least temporarily, or talking about it with them. Yeah, Frank.
Yeah, today we had lunch with at the senior center of the Jewish community,
Hmm.
and so that you have an opportunity to sit with people. You may get to know new people, but also sit with people that you know. And was sitting with a with an with a friend really, who I've known for many years, and off and on she's off her meds and she becomes difficult.
Hmm.
And I noticed that she wasn't, she wasn't feeling well.
Hmm.
There was something going on. And so I decided that instead of, I can be very, what's the word? If somebody doesn't, I can be very testy.
Hmm.
And I noticed myself like just being totally curious.
Hmm.
We're interviewing for an interim rabbi, and she has some strong feelings about it.
Hmm.
So instead of kind of just, you know, well, doesn't make any sense to me, I just inquired more about what was going on, and I felt good about it.
Hmm.
So I didn't have to agree with her. Matter of fact, at the end, I said, I understand where you come from. I don't see eye to eye with you, you know, but I thought that was I was very conscious, and actually, it felt really good, and I
Hmm.
hope I practice it more often.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Frank. It sounds like a great example. Paul.
Yeah, I like what Frank said, and I think that I think of the other, if I think of the other as having a capital O with the other, then it's like the process of othering others. If I'm othering somebody, it means that they're different, so different from me that I just can't understand where they're coming from, let's say.
Hmm.
But for me, bearing the burden of the other in that sense is um, when I'm experiencing that, that's probably when I really need to sit and listen
Hmm.
and just be curious about what they're saying, how they're being, whatever it might be. Um, because I don't know what's happening with them. And if I just assume that, well, if I was doing what they're doing, this would mean so, all these terrible things. But, I can't just assume that. They are the other. And so in some ways, bearing the burden is like taking the focus off of me. It's all about me and more about what is what is the we about, I suppose.
Hmm.
So thank you.
What is the we? I love it. Thank you. Toby.
I have this perspective about not understanding what people are going through. And let me preface my answer by saying that everything I think kind of goes in this direction. Is that when you when you encounter somebody who is disagreeable or who is rude or who is short with you, whether you know them or don't know them, or even someone who just disagrees with you, you I'll put it in terms, I don't have any idea what they've just gone through.
Mhm.
Whether their spouse just left them or they've been they've received a critical diagnosis or something. You have no idea. They're not going to announce that to the world, especially if you don't know the person.
Yeah.
So when I look at bearing the burden of the other, I try to look at if someone is disagreeable or unpleasant to me for some reason, I try not to take it as like a personal affront that they meant to intentionally insult me or to be rude to me. I try to look at it as I don't know where this behavior is coming from, and I don't have any way of knowing. And so I try to treat them with extra kindness and extra sensitivity. And that's the way I look at bearing the burden of the other, because you don't know what the burden of the other is necessarily. I mean, sometimes you might, if it's a spouse or someone close to you, you might know, but mostly we don't know.
Yeah. I've had to I got off of Nextdoor like a few years ago because it just got really, I don't know if other people have had this experience, it just got really toxic. But before I got off, there was someone posted a picture of this cat and they were ranting about this cat was peeing in my bushes and it smells terrible and I know what to do about it. It's awful. And if it's your cat, you need to control the cat. And someone wrote in and said, "Oh, I'm your neighbor. It's my cat. I'm sorry. I didn't know what they're doing, that they were doing this. I don't know." And the person kind of responded again and so I wrote something like, "Oh, we used to have this problem and we found this non-toxic cat repellent spray that we could just spray on the bushes and that would and then the cat went away and didn't bother us anymore." And the person responded something like, "Oh, I didn't know about that. Thank you." And one of my friends who's a neighbor happened to notice this and they're like, "Wow, you really calmed that person down." Like somehow, like from the way I wrote the note, it was just non-judgmental and tried and I really empathized with this person because I knew like they were being really mean with the way they were writing about this. But I also like we had a house where we didn't have air conditioning and we tried opening the windows at night and all that came in was this horrible cat pee smell and it was really upsetting. And so I know it's no fun to be in that position. So I don't know that I always show up in that way, but it's I'm reminded of that where one time I got it right, where if we can just respond with kindness and try to address like the person's real issue, that it can calm someone down. And I've heard a lot of you talking about that and talking about similar ways of trying to just be there with the person through their difficulty. And sometimes we can make a connection. Any other thoughts? Hi, Karen. I see you've joined us. Glad you could make it. We are now going to dive into our second week of exploring honor. So we've talked about bearing the burden of the other. So can someone please unmute and kind of read this definition of honor? And I also included a definition of chesed because this is our chesed Mussar cycle. And so we're always thinking about how is it that honor can help us as we practice chesed. So could someone read these, please?
I can read it.
Thanks, Carrie.
Honor is the ability to recognize the humanity in other people, feel empathy, and treat them with respect, dignity, and even with reverence. Hesed is going above and beyond to help and support another person.
Right. So what are some ways, from what we've been talking about, this bearing the burden of the other person? Of course, there's many different soul traits that we could use. But what are ways that kind of honor or chesed, practicing them can help us do that? And there are elements in these and a lot of the stories. Yeah, Bonnie.
So I have gotten involved with a program in Mountain View. For those of you who don't know Northern California, it's south of Palo Alto. So it's south of Stanford, north of where I live. And it's housed in a church, but it's not part of the church. It's called the Hope Community because it's on the corner of Hope Street in downtown Mountain View. And I try, and not as much as I would like to get it in, but I try to sign up to either do a serving, and I have to be there at 6:30 in the morning, serving breakfast or preparing. These are people who are unhoused, or many people in an apartment or living situation. Number one, food is not the number one thing for them. It is a hot shower and a laundry and getting their laundry done. I wasn't aware of that. So there are there are two washing machines and two dryers. You take their things, you put them in a bag, you set that up, or you clean the bathrooms that have showers.
Mm.
It is very humbling for me. I don't clean my house. I keep it clean, but I don't clean it. I have somebody that comes in and cleans it, and that whom I pay. This is something that keeps me humble.
Mm.
And one of the synagogues I belong to, that's where I got involved in it. And to me, it's really important. Unfortunately, it's Wednesdays or Saturdays. Saturdays I go to services. And Wednesday, the one granddaughter I have here is in school, so I can't take her with me.
Mm.
Could, but I can't because they need you at 6:30 in the morning.
Mm.
But it's, I believe, a way of honoring people who are in a position
Yeah.
that I don't ever want to be in.
Thank you for sharing that, Bonnie. Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful example. And in some ways, that is also bearing the burden, these other people too, or you're doing something, with, thank you. Carrie.
I'm on the council, on the cultural council, and we've started a program a year ago, maybe. I'm not sure exactly when. One of the churches in town offers free lunches twice a week. And we brainstormed about bringing music, we call it music at the table, to this time period. We get musicians to come in, local musicians. We pay them for an hour and a half of music. And it's a way for people who are homeless or very poor or whatever, do not have an opportunity to listen to music or to go to concerts or anything like this. And we bring in really good musicians, and it has been quite successful, very emotional. There's also, as Bonnie said, there's, food isn't the only thing that people care about. There's housing, and we have a portable Red Cross type thing there for doing stuff and laundry and so forth. But it has, hearing everybody's stories has been very eye-opening. And I don't do as much as a couple of the other people on the committee do in terms of helping people find housing. There are social workers, there's a lot of support people there. But it's been, for us, it's been transformative to be able to help people in a very, what we thought would be minor way, but it's just impacted them enormously.
Mm.
And we, the program's been so successful that we're looking for donors and to help us keep it going year round, because the church wants to have it twice a week instead of just once a week that we have the music.
Mm.
And it's just been fabulous to see how people respond to it, and sometimes get up and perform themselves. And it's just really special, really special. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie, for sharing that.
I know it has something to do with what we were talking about, but I couldn't make the
Yeah, no, I think it does.
connections.
I think it does. I mean, it is, it's fundamentally honoring humanity in another way. These aren't just, you know, robots or pets or whatever that we just sort of shovel some food at them, that they have souls that need nourishing as well. Reb Nachman of Breslov said that music is one of the best ways of connecting with the divine. So you could very easily argue that that's holy work, bringing music to people. Um, I think that fits very nicely with this next reading as well. This is one we've probably looked at before, but I think it's worth reviewing again. So this is from Rob Shlomo Volby, who was one of the great Mussar masters of the 20th century. Um, would someone like to unmute and read this?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. The ultimate value you can give a person is to treat a person seriously, to take notice of that person. Even just a hello, I've noticed you, shows that person that they are valued. Their presence has not gone unnoticed. Should I go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. When you treat a person lightly and you don't acknowledge them, you sit at a table and talk to all your friends, ignoring the one person who sits by themselves. You are stripping this person of their value, in effect, giving them a curse.
Thanks, Marjorie. Okay, so Bonnie, I saw your hand go up, I think. Yeah.
So it went up very quickly. I had the privilege for 4 times, which was every other year, of teaching a Hebrew high school class called Panim El Panim, face to face, which was the curriculum was put together. If those are people who remember Cage and BBYO. And part of this year curriculum is that we go to Washington, D.C., because Martin Luther King weekend is a day of service in D.C. Has not made it out in California because Martin Luther King weekend is a day of skiing. But the rest of the country has picked it up. And my high school kids, which was just such an honor for me to teach, learned we were told to bring things in good condition, gloves, hats, scarves, sweaters, to people who lived unhoused, wasn't the term then, who were living in the parks, and
Mm,
how to give them a gift so that they maintained their humanity.
mm,
And it was uplifting for not just the kids, for me. And many years later, 10 years later, at a wedding, one of the guys came up to me and said, "You know, Bonnie," because first he called me by my last name. And I said, "You're not in class, you can call me Bonnie." He said, "I've never looked at a homeless person since then the way I looked at them before." Taught the
mm,
kids how to look in their eyes, how to smile, how to show them what they had, and let the person pick,
mm,
which were for these kids coming from a middle to upper middle class Jewish home, was a completely different world.
mm,
The program has stopped, unfortunately. It was the one that Sid Swartz developed,
mm,
Rabbi Sid Swartz. Some of you may know who he is. It was so meaningful to the kids, to the high school kids, and it was so meaningful to me because it also changed the way I look at people.
mm.
I wish it were still there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Bonnie. Yeah, that's really, treating people seriously. I work with a charity in Syracuse, my hometown, and they have a food pantry, and it's all about you go in and pick the food yourself. We're not going to bag up food and tell you what you should be eating. It's you get to choose, and sounds very similar to part of what Bonnie was talking about. And that's a way that we preserve a person's dignity, treat them seriously. Yeah, thank you. Martin.
I'm in Italy often, and there's a nice cultural habit there about how you take someone seriously. So if you're walking past someone and if you recognize them, and if you say, "How are you?" the person must stop and tell you how you are. And here sometimes we say, "Hi, how are you?" and you nod and you keep on walking. So how are you? It doesn't get answered. But anyway, it's a nice little cultural thing from Italy that's somehow maybe Americans can learn that too. So yeah.
Thank you, Martin. And if I may, why I can see the connection to what we're talking about, but maybe in your own words, like how does that connect to this idea of, greeting someone, taking someone seriously?
Yeah, well, it means you're if I say to you, "Greg, how are you?" and then I'll invest the time to hear you, and so that makes a stronger connection,
Yeah,
and it's a better world. Yeah, good.
yeah. Thank you. I love that. It's a better world. Just spending a minute listening to someone, how someone is in and of itself makes it a better world. I agree with you completely. Beth.
I used to volunteer at a nursing home, and a lot of people hate to visit nursing homes. Even the relatives don't want to visit the nursing homes. And I was in Texas at the time, and Texas has a law that says that every resident must get 2 visits per week. And the staff, if the family doesn't visit, then they either ask a volunteer to come and visit, or sometimes the director of the nursing home would be doing visits because somebody had visited a particular resident.
Mm.
So I would go twice a week, but sometimes I would be very devious and I would trick my friends into going with me. And
Mm.
I'd say, I come with me to the store, but I just want to stop and do one little errand first. It'll take 15 minutes, no problem, in and out. And they would go with me, and we're pulling into the nursing home, and they're going, "Oh, the nursing home." I go, "Really, it's cool. Just come in, and you don't have to do anything or say anything. Just come with me and keep me company. I'll do all the talking." And once they got inside and saw how appreciative the people were, that you just walk past them and smile. I mean, I couldn't visit everybody, and the ones that I did know and had a relationship with, I try and give everybody a hug, a sideways hug. One time, one guy went up to the director and said, "She didn't give me a hug this week," and complained about me. But so many people came back and said, "Wow, I feel so much better having been there." And they wanted to come again, because we got more from it than the people did that we visited, or the people who give, like I think Bonnie was saying that the ones who give are more blessed than the ones who receive. They have a stronger memory of what happened, and it leads them. They probably don't know the word Mussar, but it leads them toward making a better world.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. It reminds me of a teaching from the Talmud, and I may not be getting this right, but I think I am. It's like one who gives a coin to someone gets one blessing, and one who gives a kind word gets 7 blessings. That it's not just about the material. I don't know if that's Frank or Linda.
This conversation reminds me of my own needs to have a kind of conversation that matters, and especially today in our country where we don't know how to do that,
Mm.
and we pay for it collectively.
Mm.
Um, and so any opportunity to have those conversations where we learn from one another in terms of how to listen. And I think you used the word deep listening. Love that term, uh, because often it's a shallow one. But we could teach it ourselves, and we could teach others to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one way to be in the world today to to support that idea that we are deep listeners and we can be.
Yeah, love that. We are deep listeners and we can be. There's a second part to this also, where that if we treat someone lightly or we leave them sitting by themselves, it's almost like we're giving them a curse. There's a proactive streak in Jewish teachings where it's not enough just to do no harm. We need to proactively do good, right? That's what enthusiasm was all about, right? Is kind of proactively going out there and doing things. And so I'm wondering, do you agree with that? Is it like giving someone a curse if you're not? Yeah, Marjorie.
Well, while everybody's discussed, well, for me, some of the acts of loving kindness are sometimes I hesitate. It's like, who am I really doing this for? Like somebody needs a favor and you're like, oh God, do I really, there's 20 feet of snow and I don't really feel like picking you up and bringing you to the store. And um, what gets, so I need motivation to get myself out of that. Like and the idea that I'm disappointing this other person. How is that going to make me feel?
Mm.
Who are you really doing this for ultimately? No, it takes yeah. I'm not sure if I have the right words, if I'm making sense, but sometimes it's not easy. And going again, I'm repeating myself. If I think about it as a curse, to the other person, it's no skin off my, big deal. So you take your time if you're doing an errand for somebody, or I have a neighbor right now who he can't give himself eye drops. He had cataract surgery and he's coming by 4 times a day. And it's like, oh God. And it's like, well, it's not like I'm going anywhere. I'm here anyway. And when he's done, it's like, okay, I did a mitzvah. I did somebody a favor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a process for me. I will admit it.
Yeah, well, that's why this is a practice and it is a process. It's like these things aren't trivial. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's like, yeah, why is this even, why am I thinking twice? Well, sometimes we think twice about these things. And there's a quote which I didn't know if we were going to get to today, but I did just want to share it because it's very relevant to what you were saying. It's the second one. Do not seek greatness for yourself and do not crave honor. Let your performance exceed, I think that says, yeah, let your performance exceed your learning. And there's a certain level that sometimes, maybe why are we doing this? Well, it's, I want the pat on the head. That was a big problem for me. And when I was in the corporate world, is they're always willing to give you a pat on the head. And for me, it became about the pat on the head more than anything else. And that was a really negative cycle I found myself in. Any comments about this thought? It's called chasing honor, which is one of the big no-nos in the Mussar world. We don't want to be just running after this recognition. Yes, Frank.
This time it's Linda.
Oh, Linda, very good. So nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. I haven't been here in a few weeks and I have to admit I miss you guys. I belong to a group in Virginia Beach that says it's not Christian, says it's interfaith. And I just have to take their word for it. But they have a program called the Prison Project, in which guys who are incarcerated find out about Edgar Cayce, who was the founder of this group, and asked to have a mentor, someone who will exchange letters with them about spiritual matters, not religious matters mostly. And I feel really honored to be able to send these letters. And then the mail got really weird during COVID. and sometimes the letters don't go through.
Hmm.
But when they do go through, I realize how important it is for people who are incarcerated to know that somebody knows they're there, somebody knows they did something wrong, and they want to become a better person. And that's all.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for doing that work. I always feel like that's never something that I've done to kind of work in any way with the incarcerated. And I think that's where you're really getting into the supermensch territory, because these are forgotten people. And they are people.
We're asked not to ask them why they're in jail unless they want to tell us.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, fortunately for me, only one person has told me, and I sort of wish that they hadn't, but I moved on.
Yeah.
And it reminds me that there's so much more to each of us than the worst thing we've ever done.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Toby.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, for bringing that up. I was not going to mention it, but I'm part of a group of people who visits people on death row. Not my own clients. I only have 2 on death row, but because once you've been sentenced, we're not allowed, because in a proceeding that's ongoing, they have lawyers, and we aren't allowed to just go in and talk to people miscellaneously. But after they've been sentenced, and these are, and they're mostly guys. In fact, there's only one woman on death row, but their families forget about them. Once you're on death row, you're done. And wives and family members very rarely continue relationships. I won't say it never happens, but it's rare. So once you're on death row, it's a pretty rough place to be, a very rough place, because I've been in supermax prisons that are child's play compared to death row. But we go down once a month, sometimes more. And a lot of these guys just a lot of them read voraciously. The prison libraries, thankfully, are good. And they read, and they'd like to have somebody, obviously can't do a book club on death row, but they'd like to have somebody to talk to about what they've read. And I find it's really enjoyable and mentally challenging for me to have conversations with these gentlemen about what they've read and why they like it and why they don't. And it's really interesting. I find I don't look at my watch or anything like that while the discussion's going on. Usually the jail guys have to come and kick me out of there. And most of us are like that. We usually go down as a group, but it's a sort of a social thing, because I live about an hour and a half from death row. So it's a fair drive down and a fair drive back. So it becomes a social occasion. Sounds kind of crazy, but it's a bonding situation for the lawyers who go down and visit. And it's a bonding situation for the lawyers and the clients who talk. They aren't allowed to talk about their case. Or, hey, I'm in here and I'm innocent, or any of that. That's not part of what we do, but I find it extremely rewarding.
Wow.
And we're trying to organize other groups that will go out to the max prisons and other places where people are, a lot of times they've been forgotten by their families, or the families have given up. So I thank you, Linda, for doing the work that you do, because that's fabulous.
And ditto for you, Toby. That's just incredible what you do. And are all the people on death row, or are
this group is? There are other prisons around in Arizona, and we're trying to organize the same kind of interchange of ideas in these less onerous situations. And I think probably in 2025 we'll be able to do that. Because there's a lot of lawyers, especially retired, people like me who don't practice in court anymore, but we like to keep our hands in, and it's more rewarding, way more rewarding for me than it is, I'm sure, for any of them. So
Well, I just want to say one more thing. I don't know if the group that I belong to does death row work, but they definitely do work. And I don't know if it's kosher, Greg, to share the name of this organization. Toby, I could give you my email address if you are looking for more people who want to be mentors. Just
I'm getting my
Yeah,
pen.
you can put it in the chat, Linda. if
Yeah,
you
that'd be
want,
great.
That's fine.
okay.
Thank you, Linda.
You
And
can
thank you.
share, and I do encourage you to share your emails, maybe privately, just so you can continue this. It's
Send
always
it to
nice
them.
to connect with people outside of our gatherings too. Speaking of connecting, we should get to the breakout rooms.
And turn off.
So another teaching from Pirkei Avot, find yourself a teacher, win yourself, it's either a friend or companion, might be a better person, and be the one who judges everyone by giving them the benefit of the doubt. And that's really the piece which I think is most relevant to this practice of honor, is giving people the benefit of the doubt. So the question for the breakout rooms is, when is it hard to give people the benefit of the doubt? Are there limits? And how does giving people the benefit of the doubt help us to practice chesed? Okay, so let's um, okay, so before I open the rooms, let me just chat. Let me just paste this in the chat because I know some of you like to copy it yourself. Okay, I'm losing the chat room. Here it is. Okay. So when is it hard to give people benefit of the doubt? Where are the limits? The rooms are open.
It's like I say, it worked.
Okay.
Ah,
Yes.
there you are. I missed you.
Well, so we have just a couple of minutes left, and it was probably shorter than you would have liked because we had a lot to say earlier. But does anyone have any insights that they'd like to share about giving the benefit of the doubt or anything else that came up in your conversations?
Harry, should I share that?
Sure.
Please, please.
Okay, so I have a seriously mentally health issue with a granddaughter who has serious mental health issues. She has borderline personality disorder. And I have learned if I want to have a relationship with her, and I do, that my sentences are often, really? That's interesting.
Hmm.
Is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
Because if I try to say anything that's against what she thinks, it's, well, you're not listening to me, Mimi.
Hmm.
You're not hearing what I'm telling you. You know, I have heard what you're telling me, honey, and it makes no sense. So, oh, am I giving her the benefit of the doubt? I want to maintain this relationship.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And that's
Good example.
I never thought of giving someone the benefit of the doubt in that way, But yeah, that's the ultimate extension of it, I think.
Hope so.
I think it is.
Yeah. Marjorie.
It was brought up that sometimes if it is family, or if it's a person that is really close to you and you want to maintain that relationship, sometimes you just have to give them the benefit of the doubt and let whatever, if it was a negative circumstance, you just kind of let it go. I mean, obviously, I'm thinking about it, but you move on and you focus on what's good and what's nurturing about the situation and the relationship.
Yeah. I love that idea about letting go. Again, that's not how I've thought about the benefit of the doubt, but that's absolutely part of the picture. Yeah. Don't need to legislate everything. You don't need to like be right or worry about what's right, what's not right. If we're putting, and I think that relates, what you both shared relates very directly to this idea of bearing the burden of the other. Like, yeah, Paul.
So, Carrie brought up something that was really interesting. Do you mind if I? Okay. That dealing with medical professionals can sometimes be a challenge, especially when previous experiences have been less than stellar, let's say, in terms of their ability to listen to her as a patient or really have anything valuable to add to the conversation themselves. But she was saying that in order to, in starting off a new relationship with a new professional, that the best way to do this was to ask a lot of questions. So if something didn't make sense, instead of thinking, well, here's another idiot, you can think, well, maybe I'm just not hearing them correctly. Maybe I just have to get some clarification. And then over time, knowing, that would help with the conversation because maybe the doctor um, themselves had bad experience with patients who just never did what they were supposed to do anyway. Something that we were with Frank and Linda, so Frank had mentioned that part. So it was interesting to have that. You're trying to reframe the conversation so that you are saying, "I'm just not your typical patient," giving them the opportunity to say, "I'm not an idiotic doctor either." So
Yeah, I try to become the student, let them show me their knowledge in a non-threatening way so that I can
Hmm.
establish rapport instead of just sitting there and staring and going, because I am curious. And so far it's worked.
Yeah, curiosity is powerful.
Yeah.
I'm going to share the list of practices as we're just something to think about. I think we'll probably do honor for another week when we reconvene in January. But this is the wrong slideshow.
I liked it.
Very good.
Yeah.
I liked it.
I know. I was like,
Well,
okay,
bring it up. I'm doing
Don't erase it, please.
I'm doing a parent loss grief workshop later tonight. And so, ways to remember someone, ways to honor someone who's gone during Hanukkah. This is from Aish, 8 ways to incorporate the memory of a loved one into Hanukkah. Telling a story about them, a photo, a personal prayer, cooking the loved one's favorite foods. Buy the gift you would have given the loved one, or buy yourself a gift from them. Reach out to others. Like one thing I do is I reach out to my uncle to talk about my mother, for example. And remembering that their oil has not been extinguished. As long as we live, they remain alive and their soul lives on in the world to come. And hope to light the oil even in the face of too little. Like someone in the Hanukkah story, they had to have the courage to say, there's not enough oil, but I'm going to light it anyway. And when we're dealing with loss, it takes a lot of courage to move forward sometimes.
Yes.
So we will call this the secret hidden blessing of clicking on the wrong PowerPoint.
Beautiful.
That was lovely.
So, let's just close our eyes and meditate on how we can remember, whether it's our parents, spouses, siblings, friends, those that are not with us during this holiday season. Send out love and comfort to all of those who shared this journey with us today and this year and these past few years in some cases. When you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, my friends, thank you all so much for being here. And I'm going to stop the recording and just share one more thing as well.